to another hip-hop, Temple of Hip-Hop study session. I am KRS-One. Welcome to the Temple of Hip-Hop. I'm right now in Atlantic City. I told y'all last week we was going to do Atlantic City that day. Well, now we did it. We're actually here right now, rolling up. We're going to continue the read of our gospel. We're talking about history, and we're talking about one's character in that history. But first, I got to run and do this show real quick, and let me go see what the Locks is doing.
It's Martin Luther King's birthday. Dr. King's birthday. Dr. King's birthday. Remember why we sitting in here tonight? It is because a man gave up his life so that we could be here tonight. So let's raise our consciousness now. This is the last act of the evening. So let me try to raise up a little bit.
Peace and welcome to the Temple of Hip Hop. I am KRS-One. And we are here again, another session. Man, what a wonderful week this was. At least for myself, I will extend that peace and love to everyone else as well. I hope you had a wonderful week as well. But I had a really wonderful week. What you just saw was last week, kind of kicked it off. That was Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday celebration in Atlantic City as well. Shout out to Dougie Fresh, and of course the kind words from Redman, and shout out to Math as well. Really everybody that was on the bill. I was able to see Freeway, Beanie Siegel as well, and shout out to the Locks and Mace. Nice show. And Lady B. Let me shout Lady B as well there as well. So, you know, so the week went through, and, you know, it's one thing, I just want to start off with the fact that when you ever notice that when you, like, you don't see something until you have it, meaning, you know, you don't see the car until you buy the car, then you see the car everywhere. You didn't see this particular hat or shirt or jacket. And as a matter of fact, I had bought this coat, a furry kind of coat, not a fur coat, a furry kind of coat. It was actually just a sheepskin. And I got this coat, and I knew nobody had this coat. And I'm walking around, people compliment me, yeah, yo, that coat is hot, yo, yo, yo. Get to New York. Out of all places, I'm there on Canal Street. I stop at the light. Somebody walks by with the identical coat on. Now, the coat was in a store, okay? So anybody can have this coat. And I'm quite sure more people have this coat. But I didn't see the coat until I had it. You don't see your car until you buy it. You don't see the food you like until you eating it. It's sort of like you only see according to your character, according to who you are that day, what you want. You see according to your values. You know, I tell this story all the time because it opened my eyes, actually. Let me grab this paper. It actually opened my eyes to a bunch of things. But I tell this story all the time about values and how it directs your sight. So we're in Germany. And, you know, whole family, we're all in Germany. And we parked our van on the street. We were living, actually, in Germany for about 2 months. And we parked our van on the street. Somehow, the next day, the van gets broken. Well, that night, the van gets broken into in Germany. This is Berlin. So they broke into the van. Now, in the van, we had 2 bikes, but they were thrift shop bikes. No disrespect to the thrift shop bike. But we was out there, and Simone saw these bikes, and they were pretty good. They worked, okay? So when you're in Europe, bikes are everywhere, and everyone rides a bike. And so Simone bought these cheap bikes from the thrift shop, but they worked. It was a bargain. So she got these bikes. There was about 2 of them, threw them in the back of the van. Then we drove on. We had some CDs that we didn't normally see in America. It was a collection of CDs, R&B, some hip hop, this kind of thing. So we had some CDs. Then in the van as well was some of our clothing, like our laundry was in the van, and my books. So I had went to across the street from the British Library is a bookstore, a rare bookstore. So I went to that bookstore. Oh, you know what? On the film Streetlight, in that film Streetlight, I'm at that bookstore buying Johnson dictionaries. Well, those Johnson dictionaries and some other books were in the van. So they broke into the van, took everything. We came to the van, we said, oh man, look, they took everything out the van. Now, right then and there, if you really walk in the path, you will feel violated. You will feel like, damn, man, it took, even afraid that you lost something you really needed or this kind of thing. You got to go back in your mind. What did I lose? What did I lose? All of that is human, and all of that is the feelings you're going to get somebody rob your van. But then, just like that, it was like 30 seconds of it, just like that, I snapped into the training and said, you know what? I give it away with whoever took it, I give it to you. I hope it did you some good. Now, it was not valuable stuff in the sense of valuable. It was valuable because it was ours. Okay. Now, my books were valuable. I had about $5,000 worth of books in the van. Each of these was $750 for one book, $1,200 for another book, $900 for another book. I'm buying rare books. These books are in the van, among others. They cost like $20. I had a nice little library in the van. Bike, CD. So, long story short, we say first, we got to be able to walk away from this right now. Control your emotions. Grab hold of yourself. And it's these moments right here. This is when the test comes to you right here. What do you value? These material things, even though they're valuable and you need them. But what's more important? My sanity. And that I give myself good memories, not a history of, oh, woe is me. Nope. Let's back up off this materialism. Material items, physical world, that kind of stuff could never be in control of my emotional state. So I gotta be able to walk away from this right away. I don't want to, I don't like it, I am hurt by it, but you know what? This is the training right here. Able to walk away from it. I freely give it, I give it up, and I forgive those that just stole from me and violated me. Lo and behold, the streets kicked in. And I said to Time, my daughter, I said, well, actually, we were all out there. Time, Isaac, me, Simone, and we was all out there. And Chris. And so, but Time, and I'm trying to remember this. There's a square park with street on both sides. So I took one side of the street, Time took the other side. Why? Because when the streets kicked in on me, I said, you know what? Usually when people rob stuff, crackhead type stuff, you first thing you do is you go to the dumpsters, the trash cans. You look around for your bag. You may not find the money in your wallet, but you may get the wallet and some of your ID. You may not get the stuff in the bag, but you could still get your bag back. So even after this type of theft, you go and look in the garbage cans in the area. So that's what we did. We went to the edge of the park. I took one end, Time, Isaac, Chris, we all took ends, and we started walking down both sides of the park looking for any remnants. Like, you just take our stuff and throw it into the bushes. Take what you want and throw it into the bushes. As we're walking, Time says, Dad, over here, the books. So we go around, and in the dirt, randomly just thrown around, are all my books. $1,200 book in the dust, in the dirt. $900 book hanging from a bush under something. But it was scattered. So I picked up all the books. What we realized as we went down, we picked up more books and saw nothing else. The bikes, gone. The CDs, gone. My dirty laundry, gone. All of that. But the books, they threw them in the street. Like nothing. And if we didn't come when we did, others could have just came by randomly. Like anybody, I sometimes find books on the street. I'm walking down the street, I see a book, I'm like, yo, this is crazy. I might need this. Somebody could have just been walking down the street, saw these books, and was an avid book buyer or something, said, what the hell? Johnson in the street like this? Or some other book? Yes. So we came at the right time, got our books. I gathered up all. Do you hear the word all, A-L-L? I got all my books back. And it taught me something about value. They took the bike and the CDs, the bikes and the CDs were worth only about $50. Both the bikes and the CDs together was no more than $50. The books were worth $5,000. But they did not know the value. They didn't know the value of what they were stealing. So they threw their own consciousness, threw the books away, and took what their consciousness thought was valuable: clothes, CDs, and 2 bikes. All of it together, $50, including the dirty clothes, okay? All of it, okay? The real value was in the books. Now, of course, during that time, I was studying ancient Egypt, actually Kush. And it suddenly occurred to me, as a theory, of course. I said, could it be that the images we see on the pyramid walls, on the temple walls, tomb walls, the tombs of the kings, in the Valley of the Kings there in Africa, when you go and you look at ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, and you see the stuff on the walls. Now, on the walls, there is language, there are prayers, there's history, there's all types of stuff on the walls. Now, could it have been that when the Pharaoh passed, they stuffed all this stuff, the Pharaoh went, when he passed, they would send the Pharaoh with furniture, clothes, mad jewels, gold, silver, emeralds, crystals, everything would be in there, food and so on. That went into the tomb of the Pharaoh, of the king, of the god. Now, these pharaohs knew the future. I'm not going to get into it here, but King Tut's tomb, Tutankhamun, okay, Tutankhamun's tomb, Nefertiti's son and Akhenaten's son, Tutankhamun, him. When they opened his tomb, they read an inscription on the door that said, whoever goes into this room will die within a year. 3 men went into the tomb. Within a year, those 3 men were dead. This is true story. You should look it up. They don't tell you that part about King Tut when they first discovered it, but this is some realness. 3 men killed, the first ones who went in. And they was told that it was a curse. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, it was several reasons really, but just to put a period on this particular story right here, could it be that the real value was not the gold and the silver and the ornaments, but the knowledge that was on the wall? The knowledge of immortality. They knew, these brilliant scribes and priests and pharaohs knew that their tombs are going to be robbed. So what do? You put all this stuff in the thieves' want. See, once you have immortality and you know you go into a place of immortality, which is what the pharaoh actually was going to, gold and silver don't matter. Western man is saying, oh, the Egyptians wanted to take all this stuff with them. That's why they put it in there. No, what if the Egyptians put all that stuff in there for you to come and be distracted with the gold and the silver and, oh, the furniture and it isn't your tomb raiders anyway. So they knew the tomb raiders were coming. The tomb raiders took the items and never understood the writing on the wall. Never got the full blessing of what's on the wall. You know, they still don't fully understand hieroglyphs. The Rosetta Stone did not open up everything. And so, first and foremost, I tell you this, I'll open our read up today with this, with values. With values. What do you value? It's going to determine what you could know, where you're going to go in life. You want to hear a simple formula for success? Do what's right. I was thinking about it the other day. You know, if you just do what's right, you are bound to be successful. You are guaranteed success if you just do what's right. What takes away success? Wrong. Doing what's wrong, or being wrong, or making mistakes. That takes away success. What is being unsuccessful? Wrong. Wrong is always unsuccessful and leads to unsuccess. Wrong. Knowing right from wrong, not just morally, but from a point of view of how to make decisions. This is the right decision. This is the wrong decision. This is the right direction. This is the wrong direction. This is what philosophy gives you. This is the type of mind that philosophy gives you. The ability to make decisions. That's wisdom. Discernment. I know what to do first, what to do second, what to do third. I know right from wrong. I know real from fake. I know cause from effect. I can see what's going on. And when you can see what's going on, your values are quite different. Quite different. And when your values are different, you see a different world. You see a different world, like looking at like buying a jacket that you thought you had, and then once you had it, you see everybody else with it as well. Well, your value system is going to help you to see another portion of the world that others are seeing that you cannot see because of your value system or just your values. How is it possible that I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia? How is it possible that in Atlanta, Georgia, or New York, for instance, or Chicago, for instance, or Philly, or whatever, any big city, billions of dollars are flowing through every city in the United States? Billions, okay, of dollars are flowing through every city. Your city, the city you are listening to me in right now, billions of dollars are flowing through that city. Why you don't have it? There's money in your city. No city is broke, no matter how broke it looks. No city is actually broke. There's still billions of dollars. In the poorest of cities, there are millions of dollars still flowing through that city. Why you don't have it? How is it possible for rich people to live amongst poor people? What's different about this rich person than this poor person? Or someone with an abundance of money and someone without an abundance of money? What's the difference? The difference is values. Not even knowledge yet, but values. Those that don't value money don't get it. Period. And I'm not saying greed. I love money. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about value. I value money. If you value money, meaning I'm willing to work hard for the money I get because I value your dollar. You coming to see KRS-One perform, you going to pay $25, $30 to see me perform. If I'm with my friends, Rakim, Kane, you might spend up to $75. I respect your dollar. I respect your dollar. I'm going to give my best performance, and so is everybody else. I value your respect for my show because you're paying me for it. I'm going to hone my skill and become the master of my craft because that's how I get my money. This is all legitimate. This is not greed. This is value. I value myself and I value the next person. But most people don't value the next person or themselves because they never really had a chance to think about it. Not just, some moral issue. You don't value yourself. You don't value nothing. That's a moral issue. I'm just talking about straight up intellect. Have you ever really sat down and thought about what's really important to you? Or are you just going every day where you get hit by this, that's the importance today, boom, hit by that. Nope, that's the importance today. Boom, hit by this, pushed over here by this, ran back over here by that. Not in control of your life. Your only value is to pay the next bill. That kind of life. No, this is what these teachings are also all about, and this is what hip-hop did for us. It liberated us. It gave us value. We valued breaking MC and graffiti or DJing as a means toward peace, love, unity, and safely having fun. This is what we value, and this is what we got. When we said breaking MC and graffiti or DJing, we started to see it. We started seeing it. Oh, he doing it too. Oh, she doing it too. We valued it. Others told us it was never going to be nothing. But we said, no, we value this. This is important to us. We respect this. And it's that value, that importance, and that respect that built hip-hop into what it is today. See, today, most people can only look at the money made or the popularity or that hip-hop is the #1 culture in the world or or urban culture at least. This is what's being touted. But very few of us are having that conversation way back when every 3 years they told us, you're a fad and you're going to be out of here in another 3 years. And we had to deny that and be like, nah, I don't even know what you're talking about. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We're going to do this right now. And this was the argument for many, many years. Many, many years. Now hip-hop is sitting in a certain position. Now we're here like this. And many of us have forgotten what was valuable. We let money dictate what was actually valuable. Imagine that. And I can see how you could put money, make money valuable. I can see that. But I could also see the limitation in it because we created this without money. So why make money the tool you need to be part of hip hop? Hip hop was made without money. It can make you some money, but just before it makes you that money, hip hop makes you valuable first. It makes you valuable. That's the point. It makes you valuable. And you walk around with that sense of value first. That sense of self-esteem, self-determination, value, importance. You put that on yourself first. And then when you have it on yourself, others seeing you walking with value and self-respect, then they say, he, she is valuable. How do they become valuable? Spit your rhyme. Da, 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 da. Can you do that? No, I'm valuable. How is he valuable? Yo, do your dance. Can you do that? No, I'm valuable. Can you count 10 people that can do what I'm doing right now? No, I'm valuable. I'm original. I'm valuable. I'm authentic. I'm valuable. I'm accurate. I'm valuable. I do what's right. I'm successful and valuable. Values. This is what we need to walk with. We're reading the gospel now. I'm on track 3, page 740. As a matter of fact, hold up. Did I bring a pen with me? Let me make sure I need a pen. I need my pen. And we're going to start on page 740. This is track 3 we're reading. And look, y'all, whoever's holding their gospel, you know we're getting to this. It's starting to get real thin here. It's starting to get real thin. We're almost at the end of our read. And what a joyous moment that is. We're raising our value. We're raising our value. So there's a lot of quotes with this particular section. This is track 3. I love this section of the Gospel of Hip Hop because there's a lot going on with this section right here. And so I'm going to try to get through all of it, this particular section. But there's a lot of quotes. And matter of fact, let's just start right with it. So I'm at track 3, paragraph 179, page 740. The origins of hip-hop have very little to do with hip-hop's music. Did you hear that? Let's say it again. The origins of hip-hop have very little to do with hip-hop's music. Because, and this is no disrespect to the origins of hip-hop. The TV show that's out, actually really good one too, telling stories about hip-hop and so on. There's an angle for that, so don't get it twisted. When I hear, criticizing the origins of hip-hop television show, or, however it appears in mass media, that's its own thing. Although I will admit, though, that we have been teaching the concept of the origins of hip-hop years before the television show came into existence. And this Gospel of Hip Hop is proof of that. Here we are talking about the origins of hip hop. Before this, we produced a DVD, a documentary, also called The Origins of Hip Hop. We played it maybe a couple of weeks ago as well. But this part here is important to emphasize. The origins of hip hop have very little to do with hip hop's music. They have to do with exploring the conditions that cause such music, art, and or dance to exist. Quote, to constrain hip-hop culture within the framework of chronology seems sacrilegious. Chronology. Let me hit that again. Quote, to constrain hip-hop culture within the framework of chronology, this happened and that happened and that happened, seems sacrilegious. But if you need a creation myth, you can have your Cool DJ Hurt, Grandmaster Flashes, Africa Bambaataa, the real godfather of hip hop, might very well have been some guy called Robert Moses. Moses was an unelected New York City official who exerted tyrannical control over the Big Apple city planning in the 50s and 60s. One of Moses's pet projects was the Cross Bronx Expressway, built in the early 60s. It became Route 1 for white flight from the city to the Tony suburbs of Westchester County and Connecticut. In order to build this 15-mile stretch of road, 7,000 people were displaced and large sections of the Bronx were leveled. This destroyed communities, necessitated the construction of ugly, modern housing developments, and left large portions of the Bronx nothing but rubble and tenements. With New York City bankrupt and beholden to the bondholders who imposed austerity programs on the city, the Bronx, with no incentive for civil pride, became a brutal place to live. The first generation of past CBE children, of post-CBE children, I got to figure out what CBE is, I forget what that is. The first generation of post-CBE children in the Bronx was the first group to try to place together bits from this urban scrap heap. Like carry-on crows and hunter-gatherers, they picked through the debris and created their own sense of community and found vehicles for self-expression from cultural ready-mades, throwaways, and aerosol cans, end quote. That was Peter Shapiro, The Rough Guide to Hip Hop, the book The Rough Guide to Hip Hop. So what are hip hop's origins? Other than certain street gang influences, where does hip hop begin and where, and what are its true historical origins? As an idea, is hip hop strictly a black thing? Is hip hop really an African American creation? Remember, rap's history is not hip hop's history. We know that after 1962, Jamaicans began entering the United States in huge numbers, and this group brought with them the ingredients for the start of early hip-hop. However, Puerto Ricans had already been coming to America, especially New York, since the early 1900s. And it would be this mixture of Jamaican, Puerto Rican, and African American culture that would eventually develop into early hip-hop. The first Puerto Ricans to arrive in New York were mostly artists with a variety of hand skills, like carpentry, cooking, and other manual labor skills. They also had a vast knowledge of politics and took very seriously the political future of their group in the United States. Many, if not most, of the early arriving Puerto Ricans, the newly arriving Puerto Ricans, were dark-skinned people, black people, who fit right into the African American community that was now also taking in Jamaicans, Trinidadians, and others from the Caribbean. Young Puerto Ricans began integrating with young blacks right from the beginning, and yes, there was indeed some friction and even gang rivalries between all of these cultures getting to know one another. But for the most part, everyone, Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, and African Americans, managed to get along with one another. Codes were set and turfs were established. One thing was certain, all of these non-white immigrant groups were well aware of American injustice and racism. And in a lot of ways, such oppression brought everyone together around a certain unwritten moral code based upon the common oppression many were feeling at the time. Young Puerto Ricans began playing many of the African American street games already in practice and began tasting much of the food recipes of African Americans. They also began listening to the popular music of the day enjoyed by the African American community as well as the popular dances of the day. Simplicio Rios, a young Puerto Rican who was interviewed by Oscar Lewis in 1965 for his book La Vida, explains early Puerto Rican life and the relations between Puerto Ricans and African Americans. Quote, "We Puerto Ricans here in New York turn to each other for friendship. We go out on Fridays because that's the beginning of the weekend. A whole bunch of us Puerto Ricans go out together because as far as having friends of other races goes, the only one I have now is an American Negro who owns un bar. If it were in my power to help the Puerto Rican any way I choose, I would choose a good education for them, for the little ones who are growing up now. I would like them to have good schools where they would be taught English, yes, but Spanish too. That's what's wrong with the system up here. They don't teach Spanish to our children. That's bad. Because if children of yours, that's bad. Because if a child of yours is born and brought up here and then goes back to Puerto Rico, he can't get a job. How can he when he knows no Spanish? It's good to know English, but Spanish is for speaking to your own people. That's the problem. The children of Puerto Rico have up here. Wait a minute, let me say that one more time, because remember this is a quotation from somebody speaking. That's the problem the children of Puerto Rico have up here. They understand Spanish, but they can't speak it or write it, end quote. Young Puerto Ricans not fluent yet in English learned English language learn to speak English by listening to their African American friends. Learning how to survive the prejudices of the larger white American community, young Puerto Ricans would learn slang, pig Latin, and the dozens from African Americans. These are specific street lingos back in the days, regular slang language, but also pig Latin. I'm not going to get it, but it's the changing of words, taking like the last letter of a word and putting it at the front and speaking in this kind of way, or changing the first two letters. It was crazy, but it was called pig Latin. Matter of fact, there's a song, I forget the name of it, but here's the rhythm of it. The melody goes, da 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 dee da 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 dee. Hold on. I'm not gonna get into it, but there was Missy Elliott actually did it over as well. Come around the well. See, that's cameo. The bus, the fun. There's a kid, my kid, a kid, it's a kid, like I'm doing the melody of it, but that language was called pig Latin, and this is what young Puerto Ricans were getting exposed to from the African American community. It was already speaking a street slang. Then you got this pig Latin thing going on in the hood. And then you got the dozens. Okay, let's continue on. Hold on, let me just wipe these off real quick. Then you got the dozens. And the dozens was a brutal game, another verbal game, but a brutal one, where you had to, it was a game, first of all, of emotional discipline. It was a game of emotional discipline in actuality. And let me just read on. The Dozens was a verbal street game that was all about humiliating your opponent with words. The focus of the game was to keep cool while being humiliated and to fight back with your own set of humiliating words and phrases. The loser was the one who let his emotions lead to physical retaliation. The winner was the one who kept cool and showed restraint, responding with even funnier and more degrading insults. The dozens originated when slave traders would sell by the dozen, 12 at a time, those slaves that they felt were flawed in some way: old age, mental disorder, physical illness, or some other kind of deformity. A good, healthy, mentally alert, undeformed human being, a slave, was always sold separately and for more money. Every slave knew that if you were sold as part of a dozen, that there was something wrong with you. To a slave's mentality, to be part of a dozen was personally humiliating, and so the game began. Quote, your mama ain't this, your papa ain't that, you look like this, you smell like that, end quote. This tradition of verbal assaults would find its way into the art of emceeing as MCs battled for lyrical supremacy, respect, self-worth amongst each other. As H. Rap Brown explains in his book, Die Nigger Die, 1969, quote, the street is where young bloods, young people, get their education. I learned how to talk in the street, not from reading about Dick and Jane going to the zoo and all that simple shit. The teacher would test our vocabulary each week, but we knew the vocabulary we needed. They'd give us arithmetic to exercise our minds. Hell, we exercised our minds by playing the dozens, end quote. Now stop here for a moment. The reason that I am bringing this piece of history into our study is to also show the difference between hip-hop's rap music folklore, which is what is presently being passed off as hip-hop's history, versus hip-hop's real history, which is based upon empirical data and critical research. Empirical data, critical research. This is one of the main reasons why hip-hop's actual history and start date remains a mystery. The history of mainstream hip-hop starts as DJing and MCing in 1973 with Cool DJ Herc in the Bronx. However, we can see H. Rap Brown expressing hip-hop in 1969. And what do I mean by expressing hip-hop? We mean that in 1969, H. Rap Brown acted like, spoke like, dressed like, lived like, and thought like the hip-hop community of today. We could see our elements and personalities in him in 1969. Super historically, we can see ourselves, our lifestyles, and our values in him. The point is, here's a historical figure experiencing in the 1950s and 60s what we are experiencing as hip-hop in the 21st century, yet most hip-hop history books continue to teach that hip-hop gets its start sometime around 72, 73. So when is hip-hop's actual start date in linear time and physical space? H. Rap Brown was a black revolutionary, yet he was also an MC. He rapped. He was rapping and expressing hip-hop on the street corners of Baton Rouge, Louisiana in the early 1960s. As he puts it, quote, the dozens is a mean game because what you try to do is totally try to destroy someone else with words. It's that whole competition thing again, fighting each other. There'd be sometimes 40 or 50 dudes standing around, and the winner was determined by the way they responded to what was said. If you fell all over each other laughing, then you knew you scored. It was a bad scene. It was a bad scene for the two. You know what I'm thinking about right here? I gotta say it. It's like, look at how the battles, URL, battle this and that. Back in the days we had the Blaze battles, and all of that, and all of this stuff. But this was going on. This has been going on since the 1950s. Okay, and the argument here is, don't think of hip hop just as music. The culture, the personalities, what is going on in the day is what is hip hop. And here you can see H. Rap Brown, and his name is H. Rap Brown because he was known as a rapper. He was back then rapping with poetry out his mouth. H. Rap Brown. I'm going to read some of his poetry in a minute. This dude was mean. Laid down some of the first rhymes. Some of people, you'll even hear some of his. Let me read on. But I just wanted to point that out, that they're battling. So he said 50 or 60 dudes would be standing around. What is that? That's no difference than today. 50, 60 dudes standing around, 2 dudes going at it. And you can't get mad. What do we call it today? Being emotional. They say, when the dude breaks out in the fight, they say, oh, he got emotional. Look at him, he getting emotional. And that's considered taking points away from your winner status. You can't get emotional. You got to take it and be able to dish it back out. And this is going on now in the 1950s. So we argue, when does hip-hop actually begin? We are here at the 50th anniversary of hip-hop. We're starting from 73 to 2023. But as scholars now, as philosophers now, as hip-hop cultural specialists now we begin to see that our 1973 date is an agreement. Agreement. We all agree. And which is what all of history is. Really. It's an agreement. And so we are all agreeing on 73. And now we're here at the 50th year. We're agreeing with this. But as you can see, if you look past the social contract, look past what society is saying, and dig deeper into your culture, you start to say, wait a minute, but even rap music. Okay, if you want to reduce hip hop just to rap music, well, here's H. Rap Brown. And the name is H. Rap. Okay? You can't get no more explicit than that. And he's rapping, too. Okay? In the 50s. When does hip-hop begin? It was a bad scene for the dude that was getting humiliated. I seldom was. This is H. Rap Brown talking now. That's why they call me Rap. Because I could rap. Now, mind you, I'm reading from a book. This book is called Die Nigger Die. Nigger with the E-R. Die Nigger Die. He wrote the book, H. Rap Brown. It's a revolutionary book in it. And he's talking about his life and how he came up and how he even arrived at revolutionary thinking. He's rapping on the corner. He's hip-hop in the 50s. Look at it. That's why they call me Rap, because I could rap. The real aim of the dozens was to get a dude so mad that he'd cry or get mad enough to fight. You'd say shit like, man, tell your mama to stop coming around my house all the time. I'm tired of fucking her, and I think you should know that it ain't no accident you look like me. End quote. And this is in the book. This is in the book. And it could go on for hours sometimes. Some of the best dozens players were girls. You want to hear this again? Some of the best dozens players were girls. End quote. Now, in this one statement, we can see how limited rap, hip-hop's history actually is. Here, you have a historical figure, civil rights activist, leader in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Black Panther member, and rapper. In 1969, talking about his experiences as a child some 10 to 15 years earlier, and almost none of the mainstream histories of hip-hop seem to mention this historic figure at all. Remember, I am quoting from H. Rap Brown's 1969 book, Die Nigger Die, where he is speaking of his teenage years. So even if we count back just 10 years from 1969, we can see how the art of emceeing, rapping, as well as the attitude of hip hop was in full existence in 1959 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Ponder that for a minute. And of course, the Dozens rapping didn't just begin in 1959, nor was it confined exclusively to Baton Rouge. These skills were always amongst black people, dating back to ancient Africa, as well as the beginnings of the slave trade in the United States. In fact, even if we limit our scholarship of hip hop's history to rap music's history, we come across Slim Gaylord. These are names that if you look them up, you'll see these people rapping. Punch their name up in Google. Slim Gaylord, okay? Gaillard, named Slim, Gaillard, Gaillard. The Cats and the Fiddle, and Slam Stewart, Steward, Sam Stewart of the 1930s and 1940s, who actually rapped in the way that we do today. Africa Bambaataa often talks about Shirley Ellis's name game amongst other musicians and poets like the Last Poets, who were clearly pioneers of early rap. So when does hip-hop actually begin? Zulu Nation teaches that the official birthday of hip-hop is November 12, 1974. Interviewing hip-hop historian Pee Wee Dance in the early 1990s, writer Benjamin I Green, or should I say this, writer Benjamin L. Green, no, I'm wrong again. Let me do it again. Interviewing hip-hop historian Pee Wee Dance in the early 1990s, writer Benjamin I. Green III explains in an article entitled Hip-Hop B-Boy Phenomenon, is it culture or is it a fad? And see, this is the documentation too. This is why these specific articles were chosen, because they're using words like this so you can always go back and have actual evidence of these kinds of words. Look at what they're saying. This is an article entitled Hip Hop B-Boy Phenomenon. Is it culture or is it a fad? That's the title of this article. Pee Wee Dance drops science. This is the article. Pee Wee Dance dropped science that in 1971 was the year Pee Wee Dance recalls getting his start in the hip-hop music rap culture. 1968 to 1974 were the years the hip-hop culture introduced itself to the world. Pee Wee says that during that time, there were a lot of unsung heroes that helped to shape the music, the dance, the graffiti artists, and everything else we associate with the hip-hop culture. The music was a reflection of the times, end quote. Here we can see that true hip-hop scholarship begins not with a study of the music, but with a study of the times, the cause of the music. We can see now that hip-hop does not originate exclusively in gang culture, because as Pee Wee Dance explains, quote, it gave me a sense of direction, and that was the aim to it. Culturally, there was the black consciousness, afros, cornrows, mock necks, monkey boots, pro-keds, army fatigues. Musically, James Brown set it off with Say It Loud, Cold Sweat, Sex Machine, Sly and the Family Stone, the Ohio Players, and record labels such as Stax, Delight, and Brunswick brought forth the movement, end quote. This is why we are encouraged to study hip-hop super historically in an effort to understand its total historical existence and not just rely upon what we've read or overheard as folklore in exchange for real real scholarship, or in this case, real history. H. Rap Brown speaks of female rappers for female rappers or dozens players in his neighborhood in the mid 1950s. And he says that they were some of the best, end quote, quote, some of the best, end quote, in the 1950s. H. Rap Brown was not from the Bronx. He didn't roll with Africa Bambaataa. He didn't even have turntables. Yet we could clearly see ourselves in him. We could see that his experiences were our experiences. He just experienced them before us. Modern MCing seems to get its start from people like him, a conscious rapper, as well as street dude. Not only did Brown, H. Rap Brown, participate in the Dozens, which was mostly spoken word, he also was a master of what was called signifying. This is where the style of modern rap really gets its start, as Brown explains, quote, signifying is more humane. Instead of coming down on somebody's mother, you come down on them. But before you can signify, you got to be able to rap. A session would start maybe by a brother saying, man, before you mess with me, you'd rather run rabbits, eat shit, and bark at the moon. Then, if he was talking to me, I'd tell him, quote, this is his rap now, man, you must don't know who I am. I'm the sweet Peter Jeter, the womb beater, the baby maker, the cradle shaker, the deer slayer, the buck binder, the woman finder. This style right here, you can hear Cold Crush was saying this, Rapper's Delight says this, Kumo D has a rhyme like this. Mad dudes from that era has this type of rhyme. Who you know? I'm Imp the Dip. Well, as a matter of fact, let me even go further because he actually has that in here. Look at this. Man, you must don't know who I am. I'm Sweet Peter Jeter, the womb beater, the baby maker, the cradle shaker, the deer slayer, the buck binder, the woman finder. Known from the Gold Coast to the rocky shores of Maine. Sequence said that. Known from the coast to the shores of Maine, everybody just about play my game. This is 15 to 20 years before she said that. These three girls named Sequence. This guy, H. Rap Brown, is saying these rhymes. These are street rhymes. Matter of fact, these are his rhymes. But you can see when he said them, how they became street rhymes and how those rhymes were picked up off the street because this guy put them on the street. And now they are the inflections of our craft today. Now they are actually part of the words. Let me continue and see if you remember any of this. Known from the Gold Coast to the rocky shores of Maine, rap is my name and love is my game. I'm the bed tucker, the cock plucker, the motherfucker, the milkshaker, the record breaker, the population maker, the gunslinger, the baby bringer, the humdinger, the pussy ringer, the man with the terrible middle finger, the hard hitter, the bullshitter, the polynus getter. The beast from the east, the judge, the sludge, the woman's pet, the man's fret, and the punk's pinup boy. They call me Rap, the dicker, the ass kicker, the cherry picker, the city slicker, the titty licker. And I ain't giving up nothing but bubble gum in hard times, and I'm fresh out of bubble gum. I'm giving up wooden nickels because I know they won't spend, and I got a pocket full of splinter change. See, these are metaphors that, you know, back then, these are the inflections. I'm a member of the Bathtub Club. I'm seeing a whole lot of ass but I ain't taking no shit. Did you hear that? He said, I'm a member of the bathtub club. I'm seeing a whole lot of ass, but I ain't taking no shit. See, these are the skills though that not only battle rappers are using today, but everybody. And this is called signifying, where you get this metaphor. You're not just rapping. You just don't put the words together, rap for rap. What you do is you paint a picture. You paint a picture in the minds of the person listening, and this is the real. This is the real. So I can't even think. I'm actually thinking of some of my own lines, as a matter of fact, and this is actually coming to that. It's really exciting to read this from 1959. 1959, by the way. 1959. Let's keep going. I'm a member of the bathtub club. I'm seeing a whole lot of ass, but I ain't taking no shit. Poetry. Street poetry. I'm the man who walked the water and tied the whale tail in a knot. Taught the little fish how to swim. Crossed the burning sand and shook the devil's hands. Rode around the world on the back of a snail, carrying a sack saying airmail. Walked 49 miles of barbed wire and used a cobra snake for a necktie. And I got a brand new house on the roadside made from a cracker's hide. Got brand new chimney set on top made from a cracker's skull. Took a hammer and nail and built the world and called it the bucket of blood. Yes, I'm Hemp the Dimp, the women's pimp. The women fight for my delight. Where did you hear that? And in the gospel, I underlined it because, let me say it again. I'm Hemp the Dimp, the women's pimp. The women fight for my delight. I'm the grand master with the 3 MCs. I'ma shock the house for the young lady. This first one wound up in Rapper's Delight. But Kaz said it first. He wrote it first. But where did he get it? He might have got it right here because this is even before Kaz. In fact, this line right here is also in a movie called Five on the Black Hand Side. Let's keep reading. I'm Hemp the Dimp, the women's pimp. The women fight for my delight. I'm a bad motherfucker. Rap, the ripsaw, the devil's brother-in-law. I roam the world. I'm known to wander, and this 45 is where I get my thunder. I'm the only man in the world who knows why white milk makes yellow butter. I know where the lights go when you cut the switch off. I might not be the best in the world, but I'm in the top 2, and my brother is getting old. I ain't nothing bad about you, but your breath. Now, if the brother couldn't come back behind, that's the end of his rhyme. And now he's talking. We're still quoting him out of his book. Now, if the brother couldn't come back behind that, I usually cut him some slack. Depending on time, place, and attitude, we learned what the white folks call verbal skills. We learned how to throw them words together. America, however, has black folk in a serious game of the dozens, the dirty motherfucker. Signifying allowed you a choice. You could either make a cat, a person, feel good or bad if you had just destroyed someone or if they were just down already. Signifying could help them get over. Signifying was also a way of expressing your own feelings. Now another rhyme. Man, I can't win for losing. If it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have no luck at all. I've been I've been having buzzard luck. Can't kill nothing and won't nothing die. I'm living on the welfare and things are stormy. They borrowing they shit from the Salvation Army. But things bound to get better cause they ain't get no worse. I'm just like the blind man standing by a broken window. I don't feel no pain. But it's your world. It's your world. You, the man I pay rent to. If I hold your hand, I'd give way. I'd give both my arms. Let me say it again. If I had your hands, I'd give way both my arms, because I can do without them. I'm the man, but you the main man. I read the books you write. You set the pace in the race I run. Why? You always in good form. You got more foam than Alka-Seltzer. That's the end of the rhyme. Still quoting the book. Signifying at its best can be heard when brothers are exchanging tales. I used to hang out in the bars just to hear old men talking shit. By the time I was 9, I could talk Shine and the Titanic, signifying monkey 3 different ways, and piss pot Pete for 2 hours without stopping. Sometimes I wonder why I even bothered to go to school. Practically everything I know, I learned on the corner. This is hip hop. Everything I learned on the corner, end quote. And then it says, this is hip hop. Now go back real quick. These are specific talk styles and rhyme styles in the hood at the time. Talk Shine. Okay. The Titanic. These are rhyme styles. Signifying monkey or signify. 3 different ways. And piss pot Pete. For 2 hours without stopping, he said. I could do all that for 2 hours without stopping. Everything about the spirit of this entire quote, rhymes included, is an important part of hip-hop's creation and deserves to be part of hip-hop's real history. You mean to tell me that H. Rap Brown's childhood rhymes, published in 1969, which include classic rap lines like Known from the Gold Coast to the Rocky Shores of Maine sequence, and I'm Hemp the Dimp, the women's pimp, the women fight for my delight, Big Bang Hank, and the baby maker, the cradle shaker, Prince Whip a Whip, which can be called one of the first MC styles, along with the milkshaker, the record breaker, the population maker, the gunslinger, the baby bringer, the humdinger, the pussy ringer, the man with the terrible middle finger, the hard hitter, the bullshitter, the polynuss getter, nussy getter, the beast from the east, the judge, the sludge, a style which rappers Smooth the Hustler. Word, I forgot about Smooth the Hustler. Smooth the Hustler so masterfully performed. All of this is not a critical piece of rap music's history. H. Rap Brown is not a critical piece of rap music's history. Of course it is. Just the mere fact that H. Rap Brown in 1969 is saying rhymes and rhyme styles that appear on the Sugar Hill Gang's Rapper's Delight recording in 1969 suggests that we stop jocking platinum-selling rap artists like rap fans and begin asking more academically sound questions regarding the origins of early hip-hop while most of us are still alive. I'm crying out for this before 2009. This one line, I'm Hemp the Dimp, the women's pimp, the women fight for my delight, can tell us much about hip-hop's true history and the migration of ideas that helped to manifest rap music. This one line and the style in which it is said, which also appears in the 1970s motion picture, 5 on the Black Hand Side, the same rhyme, seems to either have been a rhyme that everyone in the hood knew and added his or her own twist to, which was the actual case for many expressions of the hood before the 1980s, or it was an original rhyme by H. Rap Brown that became popular over time. But how does a rhyme set in the 1950s in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, wind up in the Bronx, New York, in Grandmaster Caz's mouth, later recited by Big Bank Hank on the classic rap recording Rapper's Delight in 1979? I tend to side with the first view because in 1950 and 1960s, everybody shared everything. Everything artistic was shared and imitated amongst the youth of the hood. No popular rhyme or street game or clothing style or slang remained the exclusive property of the originator. Most times no one even knew who the originator was. You just heard it or saw it and adopted it for yourself, putting your own twist and style to it. Everyone in the hood was embellishing upon the free-flowing ideas and trends of America's inner cities. No one owned our street games, our rhymes, our fashion trends, and our unwritten moral codes of manhood and womanhood. These expressions existed freely in the hood until these same free-flowing ideas that everyone freely enjoyed and improved upon spontaneously became a business. When young white suburban youth in the early 1980s became willing to spend real money to see real DJing, MCing, graffiti writing, and b-boying performed live, hip-hop went from being the lifestyle of a few cool people, to a mainstream business product. Before all of this occurred, however, the combination of black, African American, and brown, Puerto Rican artistic expressions was on the rise. And in all truth, this combination, along with a strong Southern artistic upsurge into the North, New York in particular, set the stage for what would become modern hip hop. It seems that b-boying, MCing, and graffiti writing did not originate in the Bronx. These hip hop artistic elements seem to have come from the Caribbean and from all over the United States, especially from the South, and met in the Bronx. Even Cool DJ Herc and his DJing techniques, as well as his sound system, were all ideas from the streets of Jamaica, not the Bronx. And I don't take pride in revealing this bit of research, being that my first big hit recording in 1986 was a song entitled The South Bronx, which suggested that hip-hop began in the Bronx, in the South Bronx. However, in the name of credible scholarship, evidence is showing that hip-hop actually grew in the Bronx. It was not created in the Bronx. This is a very interesting observation regarding hip-hop and its true history. The history of hip-hop, hip-hop's folklore, may begin in the Bronx. As Grandmaster Caz puts it, quote, hip-hop started in the West Bronx, not in the South Bronx, end quote. But the origins of hip-hop itself seem to come from Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and the southern parts of the United States, even the west coast of the United States. Aerosol, graffiti art, is said to have come out of Philadelphia around the 1960s, and the poppin' dance form, which later became part of modern hip-hop dance in the Bronx and the standard of a well-rounded b-boy, b-girl performance, is said to have originated in Fresno, California, whereas locking is said to have started in Los Angeles, California. Today we see poppin', locking, up-rockin', electric boogie, etc. as part of one hip-hop dance performance originating from one place, when in actuality all of these dance forms were at one time separate traditions unto themselves, originating at different times and at different places around the United States. Now see, I just want to stop here real quick, because this is where people have their problem. And like I said, we are celebrating hip-hop's 50th anniversary, 1973 to 2023. That is the agreed upon date. But as we dig deep, we begin to see and take a look at this, just this alone, okay, about the origins of hip hop. Where does the ingredients actually come from? Look at this. I'm reading paragraph 218 one more time. Matter of fact, you know what? We're going to go ahead and highlight 218. We're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and highlight 218 and 219. And let me read these again, because this is important. Just this part right here. Okay? Just this piece. Aerosol graffiti art is said to have come out of Philadelphia with a guy named Cornbread. Philadelphia around the 1960s. Okay? That's the graffiti art that we know. Okay? Now, graffiti been around since ancient man. Okay? But the graffiti that we know is said to have begun in Philadelphia with a dude named Cornbread. Now, that's around the 1960s, okay? Now, poppin', the poppin' dance form, which later became part of modern hip-hop dance in the Bronx and the standard of a well-rounded b-boy, b-girl performance, is said to have originated in Fresno, California. Now, look at this. We say pop locking. That's incorrect. Poppin' starts in Fresno, California. Locking starts in Los Angeles, California. Poppin', Fresno. Locking, and I'm sitting down, I can't do it, but Rerun, what Rerun's doing from, what's happening in those early shows. Locking, that is Los Angeles. Poppin' is Fresno, a city, Fresno, California. And locking is Los Angeles, California. Now here on the East Coast, we're just doing it. Popping 1 minute, locking another minute, back to the popping. But these were originally two separate traditions from two different cities on the West Coast. Okay. Today we see popping, locking, up rocking. That's another one. Electric boogie. It's another one. Because I didn't even bring in Chicago yet. And they had a television show, I think, called Highlight. Don't quote me on that, but I'll get to this in 1 minute. But Chicago, huge influence. Before Soul Train came out, Chicago was out. Today we see popping, locking, up rocking, electric boogie as part of hip-hop's dance performance originating from one place, when in actuality, all of these dance forms were at one time separate traditions unto themselves, originating at different times and at different places around the United States. This is what you got to know. Breaking, graffiti art writing, and DJing were also separate traditions practiced by all kinds of people from a wide array of backgrounds. This is why true hip-hop scholarship is so important. As scholars, we cannot rely upon rap music's incomplete history to inform us of hip-hop's true origins and nature. We must ask the hard questions and probe even deeper into what we think we know of hip-hop. So why do we theorize? Why do we theorize about the origins of hip-hop occurring outside of the Bronx? I know that hip-hop started in the Bronx. I know that hip-hop starting in the Bronx has become part of hip-hop's standard history. But it seems that from 1967 to about 1977, the Bronx was the recipient of many foreign peoples and their cultural traditions. This is interesting because mostly every major pioneer, originator of hip-hop's elements and or collective philosophy has come from somewhere other than the Bronx. And the music of hip-hop's culture, rap, seems to get its start from the previous funk and soul eras of our parents. In fact, hip-hop may not be exclusively African-American in its origin at all. Grandmaster Flash has a West Indian background. Africa Bambaataa has a West Indian background. Kool Herc has a West Indian background. Dougie Fresh has a West Indian background. KRS-One has a West Indian background, and the list goes on. This could be why African American leadership in the past has been reluctant to embrace hip-hop and call it their own. Maybe because it is not. Hip-hop may not be an African American creation. Hip-hop seems to be the result of certain foreign cultures coming together and meeting in the Bronx. And African Americans were a leading group in that meeting. Yes, African Americans are indeed major contributors to early hip-hop. However, from a scholarly point of view, hip-hop seems to have formed in the Bronx, not by the Bronx. Hip-hop was formed by black people with the help of African Americans, not by African Americans exclusively. In fact, hip-hop may be foreign to African Americans, and this could be why they may use it in the way that they do. Look at this seriously. Hip-hop remains independent of all ethnicities and cultural traditions because it is a creation of all of them. It is actually all of them, and at the same time, none of them. Yes, hip-hop comes out of the black experience and was molded by the events of the black community. But the term black is a racial identification as well as a political identification, whereas the term African American is an ethnic identification. These distinctions are important because hip-hop seems to be more black than African American. Hip-hop begins in the black community as an assortment of street games, not gangs, street music, and street attitudes. However, the so-called black community of the 1970s and 1980s was not all African American. Black, as a community, was simply that group of forgotten and rejected people regardless of ethnicity. The so-called black community was simply the working poor community. Many different cultures, religions, and ethnicities mingled together within the so-called black community. Rich African Americans did not live in black urban communities. They lived in white suburban communities. In the 1950s and 1960s, Puerto Ricans befriended poor African Americans and formed many important alliances, some legal, some illegal, some within the system, others outside of the system. Puerto Ricans and African Americans in particular lived side by side and shared their neighborhoods. Again, no black community in New York was ever all African American. Everyone lived in the so-called black community, African Americans included. White folks, Asian folks, Jews, Christians, and Muslims all lived and worked in the so-called black community. The real black community was always a multicultural, multi-faith community where African Americans lived amongst Puerto Ricans, Jamaicans, Haitians, Brazilians, Cubans, Dominicans, Africans, Arabs, and many other dark-skinned people. Here, Italians, Asians, Greeks, Armenians, Russians, etc. were those who worked within the black community but didn't necessarily live there. In truth, the term black community, as it relates to a geographical location on earth, did not and does not exist for African Americans. African Americans collectively did not own the land which they lived upon in New York. Most lived in rented apartment buildings with landlords and or state-sponsored tenement housing complexes called the projects. Migrating from the South in the early 1900s and settling all over the New York metropolitan area, African Americans and black people lived under constant pressure and harassment from the police, along with decrepit schools, corrupted hospitals, high crime, discriminatory justice, and drug abuse. In truth, there was no black African American community because African Americans were never completely united as a people internally. They were united by oppression and the various designations given to them by the white mainstream. For there to have been a real black African community, African Americans would have had to unite around specific political agendas and set specific community codes unique to the African American experience and African American development. But this never happened for African Americans as a whole. What was commonly called the black community was simply the place where the working poor, the foreign, the uneducated, basically America's undesirables, lived. The black community of the Bronx in the 1970s and 1980s was called black because everyone who was considered non-white and or poor, including whites, was confined there. And this is where hip-hop gets its start. Hip-hop seems to get its start amongst black people, not necessarily African Americans. As H. Rap Brown pointed out in 1969, black is not a color, but the way you think, end quote. In truth, African Americans have contributed to and have benefited from hip-hop like most other cultures have. African Americans were indeed part of the collective black community of the Bronx, but they were not the totality of the black community in the Bronx. Puerto Ricans, as just one major example, would bring their colorful Latino traditions into the black community, adding a breath of fresh cultural air and political strength against the oppression everyone within the black community faced. Racial segregation, prejudice, and isolation forced African Americans and Puerto Ricans in particular to stick together. Puerto Ricans brought with them many of the Caribbean food preparation techniques almost forgotten by African Americans. Puerto Ricans made African Americans bilingual. Mira, bro. I didn't know what mira meant till I met Puerto Ricans. Bilingual, and fought right alongside African Americans for civil rights and justice in the United States. It wouldn't be long before the father of rock and roll, Bo Diddley, a black man, and earlier rock pioneer Fats Domino, another black man, would begin incorporating Latin and Caribbean rhythms into their music sound. Groups like the Vulcaneers, Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, as well as the Hearttones, would combine black and Latino musicians to create a new music sound and style that neither group could produce on their own. Other Latino musicians like Pete Rodriguez, I remember people in the Bronx saying his name. You gotta roll the Rodriguez, like that, Rodriguez. Joe Cuba, don't even play games, and Joe Batan, actually they call it, would also begin to gain prominence during these times. And look up this music too, by the way. Pete Rodriguez, Joe Cuba, Joe Batan. Look up their music. This was classic. This was also what we was listening to. It wasn't just breakbeats. When you walking down the street in the Bronx, you hearing these people's music blasting out of boom boxes, out of people's windows, out of people's cars, etc. This was also part of the scene. However, as the late 1960s emerged, some Latinos, like their light-skinned African-American neighbors, some Latinos, just like light-skinned black folk, tried to bury their African ancestry in an attempt to integrate into the larger white community. In search of a perceived better life, both light-skinned blacks and Latinos that could pass for white abandoned their African heritage to become more American, white American. Television shows like I Love Lucy showed a comedic life between a Latino man, Desi Arnaz, and a white woman, Lucille Ball, as husband and wife. Broadway theater productions like West Side Story were huge hits in the United States in the 1960s, all of which helped newly arriving Latino Hispanic immigrants to integrate into the American mainstream. But some Puerto Ricans were not impressed. Arriving in New York in the mid-1900s, Arturo Alphonse Schomburg was one such Puerto Rican. Known for his struggles against Spanish colonialism, Schomburg lived in Harlem, studying and teaching the causes and the effects of the African diaspora fusion. His work can be studied at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem. Jesus Colon, or Jesus Colon, was another great Puerto Rican who contributed much to the struggle for freedom in the United States. As a journalist and revolutionary, Jesus taught many about the historical and ethnic links between Puerto Ricans and African Americans. In his writings, he exposed the psychological effects of white American racism and the roles it played in his life. Great Puerto Ricans like Felipe Luciano would lead the Young Lords and also recite poetry as an original member of the Last Poets. Influenced by popular recording artist James Brown, Puerto Rican Dennis Vasquez, the original rubber band man, would popularize a style of breaking called up-rocking, usually performed to James Brown's song Sex Machine or Jimmy Castor's Bunches, It's Just Begun. Up-rocking was performed as an alternative to violent gang confrontations. Around the 1980s, great Puerto Rican DJs like Charlie Chase of the Cold Crush Brothers, as well as MCs like Tito of the Fearless Four, Ruby D of the Fantastic Romantic Five, and Prince Whipper Whip would find their places amongst the best black MCs of their day. One of Ruby D's most famous rhymes was, quote, "Well, I'm MC Ruby D, a Puerto Rican. You might think I'm black by the way that I'm speaking," end quote. This rhyme was one of the most popular street rhymes recited by all youths of the 1980s. But this is just a small part of hip-hop's Latino influences or origins. During its incubation within the black community, that was all one sentence, but this is just a small part of hip-hop's Latino influences or origins during its incubation within the black community. Jamaicans, different from African Americans, also contributed much to the origin and further development of hip-hop. Arriving in the United States in 1967 from Jamaica, Cool DJ Herc was known for having the biggest and the loudest sound system in the Bronx, which attracted a specific group of street kids, graffiti writers, other DJs, and especially B-boys. Cool DJ Herc would attract huge crowds to the playgrounds and parks of the West Bronx, emphasizing the playing of the instrumental breaks of songs by recording artists such as James Brown, as well as the Incredible Bongo Band and Mandrill. In fact, along with the song Apache by the Incredible Bongo Band, James Brown's popular recordings would become Kool Herc's main records to play. And while many DJs in the Bronx like El Marco, Mandingo, DJ Maboya, Elvis 007, and others were also playing James Brown recordings, Cool DJ Herc was considered a street DJ because he would play his music on a huge sound system outside in the playgrounds and parks for free. These events were called jams, and at the time, there was nothing special about a jam. They happened often. Many other DJs that simply didn't get the notoriety of Kool Herc, or weren't as good as Kool Herc, or didn't have as much juice, power as Kool Herc, or simply fell to drugs, crime, and growing up in the hood, also played music in Cedar Park and other places around University Avenue in the Bronx. But they were hardly mentioned in hip-hop's mainstream. But they are hardly mentioned in hip-hop's mainstream history because they never made it to radio and or television. And this is very important to know. Hip-hop's true pioneers didn't even know that they were building a culture, a music genre, a $10.5 billion entertainment industry, a revolutionary movement for change. Many of hip-hop's future pioneers are still in jail. Not future. Many of hip-hop's true pioneers are still in jail. And there's a comma here too. This was written, again, before 2009, so imagine. They just rotted there. Many of hip-hop's true pioneers are still in jail, outgrew the movement, or are dead. Only a few of us have survived to tell our story. The people you see today holding the title of pioneer, including myself, are really the survivors of a very dangerous and turbulent time in America's history. It is truly a miracle that hip-hop exists today. No so-called pioneer of hip-hop can ever say that they alone originated hip-hop or formed it to be what it is today. Any one of us could have been killed, locked up, or simply discouraged at any time. Hip-hop was and still is a divinely guided movement, and as scholars, you must know this. Hip-hop's true history has very little to do with very little to do with rap music's platinum artists. Hip-hop's million-selling artists are indeed part of hip-hop's culture and history, but it is not their or anyone else's CD sales, tour dates, and or album releases that are exclusively responsible for hip-hop's cultural and political existence. Presently, hip-hop's history is presented through the mainstream events of rap music, and this is simply inaccurate. Hip-hop was going on all over the United States long before the Sugar Hill Gang's Rapper's Delight recording. Even Kool Herc, the recognized father of hip-hop, was not alone at the birth of hip-hop. Kool Herc had a crew: his sister Cindy, Pebbly Pooh, Timmy Tim, Clark Kent, Coke La Rock, Pee Wee Dance, the Nigger Twins, Phase 2, and others. These too can be called fathers and mothers of hip-hop. In his time, Kool Herc was not just a DJ, he was also an activist in his community, a believer in God. He was conscious and talented as a graffiti artist in his day. Africa Bambaataa was another street DJ with a Caribbean background who could be found DJing funk and soul music in either the playground public parks of 123 in the Bronx or at the playgrounds of the Bronx River housing projects. Unlike traditional African Americans, these other blacks, with different histories to draw from, had no fear of the police or white America and often criticized African Americans as being lazy and always blaming the white man for depriving them of those things they had the ability to go get for themselves. Sometimes Bam, Africa Bambaataa, and Jazzy J would be at the 161st Street Playground, Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, or at Stevenson High School's handball and basketball courts in the Bronx, playing funk and soul music for the public. The study as to why and how this was accomplished during some of the most turbulent times in American history is the essence of hip-hop's true historical scholarship. Urging his followers to read the Bible and the Quran, Africa Bambaataa felt that American blacks had been miseducated about Africa and its contributions to world civilization. From the very beginning, Africa Bambaataa would structure hip-hop to be an all-inclusive culture that promoted the greatness of African people worldwide. This is hip-hop's real history. It was Africa Bambaataa who would introduce hip-hop and its elements all over the world. In fact, many countries, if not all of them, would be introduced to hip-hop's core elements and ideology through Africa Bambaataa and Zulu Nation's world tours. Africa Bambaataa through Zulu Nation would continue to strengthen, organize, and teach hip-hop throughout the 1980s, not only as a unified community of people made up of all races, classes, and ethnicities, but also as, quote, a cultural movement which is expressed through various artistic mediums we call elements. The main elements are known as MCing, rapping, DJing, writing, aerosol art, b-boying, b-girling, breaking, knowledge and overstanding, end quote. That's Zulu Nation Hip-Hop History 2. It was Africa Bambaataa who established hip-hop's earliest principles: the infinity lessons, the 11 points of light, the laws of success, Hip-Hop History 1 and 2, and more. Bam would teach that, quote, when we made hip-hop, we made it hoping it would be about peace, love, unity, and having fun, so that people could get away from the negativity that was plaguing our streets: gang violence, drug abuse, self-hate, violence against those of African and Latino descent, Even though this negativity still happens here and there, as the culture progresses, we play a big role in conflict resolution and enforcing positivity, end quote. Africa Bambaataa would do much to help end gang violence in New York, introduce rap music on the radio, and unite rap artists of the mid-1980s. Africa Bambaataa would not only popularize the Rocksteady crew, DJ Jazzy J, the Tats crew, DJ Red Alert, DJ Chuck Chillout, DST, now DXT, the Soul Sonic Force, and many other pioneers through Zulu Nation. He would also organize the very first hip-hop summits and conferences in hip-hop's real history. Through Ice-T and Africa Islam, Africa Bambaataa would also organize hip-hop on the West Coast of the United States, paving the way for a new era in hip-hop. At a time when lawlessness, corruption, and hatred existed openly and freely in American society, and the rule of law was ignored, and God was declared dead, Africa Bambaataa fearlessly held our culture together, advocating peace, love, unity, and safely having fun through a knowledge and respect for oneself and for one's community. His repeated reminders for hip-hop to seek peace, love, unity, and healthy fun have become the principal pillars of hip-hop's vision of itself. Technically, Africa Bambaataa is hip-hop's first teacher. The principles he introduced into our culture belong to no specific race or group of people. They are simply part of that timeless wisdom that no group of people can live without. We can see here that even though hip-hop is introduced to the world by several kinds of black people, hip-hop's origin is still not confined to one race or to one ethnicity. Hip-hop is even beyond the collective black experience. In other words, all black people, African Americans included, are not hip-hop. Just because you are part of the black race does not mean that you automatically love and produce hip-hop. And this again is why hip-hop itself cannot be considered exclusively a black thing. Artistically, it may look this way, but historically and culturally, this was never the case. In the early days when the awareness of hip-hop first came into the Bronx, it hit everyone at the same time. However, just because you were black did not mean that you were hip-hop. Just because you were Latino did not mean that you were hip-hop. And just because you were white did not mean that you could not relate to hip-hop and then produce it yourself. Black, white, and Latino adults, as well as youth, criticized early hip-hoppers as engaging in something that was not going to last. The question was, why are you putting such time and energy into this bullshit? And the unanimous answer across the board was, this is an expression of who I am. This exchange was seen in the conflict between graffiti writer Scheme and his African-American mother, Barbara, in the graffiti documentary Style Wars. Barbara clearly reflected the aggravation and concern of most parents at the time when she said, quote, "Society should go down in the subway and lock them all up because they don't have any business down there." Speaking of the train yards and subway tunnels. It's dangerous down there. People that work down there 25, 30 years have accidents. But his, pointing to Scheme, contention is that he is immortal. I guess like most 17-year-olds are immortal, end quote. Graffiti writer Scheme replies, quote, "It's a matter of getting a tag on each line in each division, you know? It's called going all city. People see your tags," a graffiti writer's name, "in Queens, uptown, downtown, all over," end quote. Barbara, Scheme's mother, she chuckles and then says to the interviewer, quote, "I can only laugh to keep from crying because what's happening is I really don't think he knows how silly that sounds. He's going all city? I mean, to what end? And when I ask him, he says to me, well, just so people see it and they know who I am, end quote. Scheme then exclaims, quote, it's not a matter of so they know who I am, end quote. Mom continues, quote, so they see it, and after that they see it, so what? End quote. Scheme responds, quote, it's a matter of bombing, writing your name in as many places as you can, knowing that I can do it. You know, every time I get in the train, almost every day, I see my name. I say, yeah, you know it, I was there. I say, yeah, you know it, I was there. I bombed it. It's for me. It's not for nobody else. I don't care about nobody else seeing it or not. It's for me and other graffiti writers that we can read it. All these other people who don't write, they're excluded. I don't care about them. They don't matter to me. It's just for us, end quote. Again, the concerns of Barbara, Scheme's mother, were not unique to her or to her race at the time. Most parents felt the way that she did about the rebellious and even illegal activities of early hip-hoppers. The hip-hop motion picture classic, Wild Style, shows the same conflict between graffiti writer Lee and his older Puerto Rican brother Hector, who has just returned home from military service. In the movie, Lee has just come from the train yards and is sneaking into his apartment through a fire escape window. As he enters the apartment through the window, his older brother Hector, not knowing who is coming through the window, greets Lee with a pointed pistol. Lee says, Hector, I thought you were supposed, Lee says, quote, Hector, I thought you were supposed to be in boot camp, end quote. Hector replies, quote, you know I was gonna shoot your ass. I thought I ought to rearrange your face. That's what I should do. What the fuck is with that do-rag? And by the way, let me read this again. You got to go and watch the movie Wild Style. We're quoting from the movie Wild Style, and before we were quoting the movie Style Wars. And the reason for that is because we're talking about we're showing the difference between the African American community and the hip hop community that was made up of a bunch of different migrating people and African Americans. You know, black folk born here like that. And we're showing in Style Wars, you have a black family that's going through the same thing. Older African American looking at the younger African American saying he's bugging, going to the train yards. And she was right. I mean, you can't argue with a mother seeing her son do this illegal. He's going nowhere with this. No one could see that we was building a culture. You just had to want to do this. It was in you. And like he said, it's not for nobody else. It's just for us to see. And that was the attitude, that we exist regardless of what you think. Now, that's pretty arrogant. And that's pretty arrogant. And it's also disrespectful to your moms, to your parents. But this is what started it right here. This is what started it right here. The fact that we're going to write, and by the way, Scheme, he loves his mother. He didn't disrespect his moms, but he's fighting for what he believes in for himself. And his mother is saying, what you believe in is dangerous and ridiculous, okay? And it was. And it was. That was his mom's. Now, on this side, we're reading now the Puerto Rican. Same situation. Older brother coming out of military service, meeting the younger who just came from the train yards like Scheme. And here now, the exchange. You know, I was going to, quote, I was going to shoot your ass. I ought to rearrange your face. I ought to rearrange your face. That's what I should do. What the fuck is with that do-rag on your head anyway? I don't know what the hell you were doing in my crib, home, but I want this shit, pointing to the aerosol art on the wall, out of my room, end quote. Lee responds, quote, what shit? Pointing at the aerosol art on the wall, Hector says, quote, this shit. It's fucking garbage, end quote. Lee responds, quote, hey, this isn't garbage. This is something you don't get to see in the infantry, my man, end quote. Hector replies, quote, people are sick of it. Have you been busted, arrested for this yet, end quote. Lee quickly and nervously replies, never, never. Hector continues, you mean to tell me I'm busting my ass sending money home for you and mom and you're sitting at home doing this shit? End quote. Hector concludes his criticism by saying to Lee directly, stop fucking around and be a man. There ain't nothing out here for you, end quote. Lee disagrees and responds by saying, quote, oh yes there is, gesturing toward his aerosol wall art. He says, this. He says, there's nothing out here for you. Lee says, yes it is. This is what's out here for me. Such conflicts between the elders of our traditional ethnicities and early hip-hop were common. In fact, this is the way it was. This was the reality of a hip-hopper. Here, in this instance, a graffiti writer. In the same motion picture, Lee explains to a friend, quote, being a graffiti writer is taking the chances and shit, taking the risk, taking it like all the arguments from the transit, from the police, from your own moms, you know, from your friends and shit, you know, from your friends and shit. Like that's how it's supposed to be said. You know, you got to take all that bullshit, end quote. This is what it was like to adopt the character of early hip-hop, and this is why many young people gave up on their hip-hop dreams. It was simply too much of a hassle. To participate in early hip-hop, you had to actually be hip-hop. Those who stuck it out and endured the criticism did so because they had no choice. Hip-hop was who they were personally. Because of this, many hip-hoppers were discriminated against. People didn't want to associate with us. We were the outlaws, the outsiders, the rejected, those other people. So through the rejection of our own races, ethnicities, and immediate families, we formed our own community made up of all the people rejected by their families, races, and ethnicities. Historically, hip-hop belongs to no race of people because every race of people rejected it when they encountered it. Mainstream blacks in particular wanted nothing to do with early hip-hop. However, it is interesting to observe how hip-hop is continuously associated with African Americans and African American history by today's mainstream scholars now that it has achieved such worldwide and financial success. Regardless of race or ethnicity, the arts of b-boying and b-girl and MC and DJing and graffiti writing found very little favor amongst the elders of any community. And this is why true hip-hop cannot be said to be a racial thing at all. You just have to feel it. True hip-hop was never about race. It was always about a certain character and skill. And even though hip-hop does get its start in the minds of Jamaican, Puerto Rican, and American-born black youth, it was still a specific kind of Jamaican, Puerto Rican, and American black, and eventually white youth who broke with their traditions and actually became the first hip-hoppers. However, most Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, and American-born black and white youth influenced by early hip-hop never became DJs, MCs, etc. Many of them, even if they wanted to pursue the awareness of hip-hop, were told, turn that noise off, or stop trying to act black if you were white. Blacks were told to stop trying to act street. Others were told, you'll never get a job doing that. Even white graffiti writers in the early 1980s complained in the graffiti documentary Star Wars that it was harder on black kids or Spanish kids because everybody thinks a graffiti writer is black and Puerto Rican, and that, like, you know, is wrong, you know. A lot of white people are writing, end quote. I didn't start the quote, but that was the end of it. The quote started was, It says even white graffiti writers in the early 1980s complained in the graffiti documentary Star Wars that it was, quote, harder on black kids or Spanish kids because everybody thinks a graffiti writer is black and Puerto Rican, and that, like, is wrong. A lot of white people are writing, end quote. But that didn't stop the then mayor of New York City, Edward Koch, from launching an all-out assault upon New York City's graffiti writers, who he and others felt were mostly black and Puerto Rican. His anti-graffiti campaign enlisted artistically prominent African Americans like dancer Jean Grey, who was scripted to say, referring to graffiti art, so, quote, so if you really want to make something out of your life, use your head, quote, while African American, end quote, while African American singer Irene Cara continued Jean's scripted statement saying, or your voice, but don't waste time making a mess, end quote. Others like prominent Latino boxing champions Hector Camacho and Alex Ramos would join Mayor Koch's campaign with a scripted statement that also aired on local television, quote, graffiti is for chumps, end quote. In fact, Mayor Koch's anti-graffiti campaign came with a bus and subway advertisement that read, quote, make your mark in society, not on society, end quote. The point is that hip-hop's early elements first appeared colorless and raceless, or colorless, raceless. Hip-hop began as the artistic movement of a certain group of urban people. All black people didn't embrace the idea of hip-hop. All Hispanics, whites, Asians didn't embrace hip-hop either. Only a certain kind of person was attracted to hip-hop in its early days, and this fact is what inspires us to seek the deeper meanings as to why only a certain group of people in the world were and are attracted to hip-hop and are born with its artistic and intellectual abilities. Hip-hop may be the reawakening and the coming together of an ancient tribe once scattered by conflict. That will conclude track 3, or the third track, track 3. What a read. What a read that was. And what are we saying? In summary, this is pointing to the fact that when you really look at hip-hop, like here we are at the 50th anniversary, and wouldn't it be, we would be ending our read with this. We're here at the 50th year. And yes, we agree that Kool Herc is the father of hip-hop. Cindy Campbell, the mother of hip-hop. 1973, 1520 Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx. This is the birthplace of hip-hop. We agree on that. The Temple of Hip-Hop preaches that. That's what we've been preaching. But this is what I would say an agreed upon history. When you look at the facts and you look at the evidence of it, when you look at the facts and the evidence of hip-hop as culture, we start with H. Rap Brown, who's talking about MCing and battling in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1959 in a book that comes out in 1969. He got rhymes in the book, rhymes that appear on Rapper's Delight, styles that appear throughout rap music's history. And like this particular read argues, let's not just take rap music's history, like, platinum selling artists, because even rap music's history points you to H. Rap Brown, points you to the struggle, points you to Black Panthers, points you in that direction. Ain't no bitches and hoes at the beginning of this. There's dozens. And they said the women in the dozens was fierce. And they're doing that in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They're doing it all over the United States. I mentioned breaking, popping, locking, Fresno, LA. Manages to come to New York. Graffiti art from Philadelphia. What we're calling breaking, MC, and graffiti art DJing, just those 4 elements are coming from all parts of the United States, and the people bringing them together ain't even from the United States. Their families are not even from the United States. They're from other places: Jamaica, Trinidad, Haiti, Puerto Rico, these places. It seems like we all met in the Bronx. The Bronx was the kitchen, the pot even, that put all this together. Kool Herc's jams brought these people together. We saw that we had something and kept repeating it and building upon it. And now you have what we have today, the mighty hip-hop culture. This is going to conclude my read. You know we get together like this every Sunday, 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. The Temple of Hip Hop is a hip-hop preservation ministry, archive, school, and society. We started in 1996 with the affirmation, rap is something we do, hip-hop is something we live. We are not just doing hip-hop, we are hip-hop. And of course, I am hip-hop. So I leave you now with your values, like we started off with. What do you value? Your values are going to open your mind as to what you can see. You see what you value. Your mind opens up. It looks for whatever it is that you value. Don't be stupid like the thieves that broke into my van, threw away the books, the knowledge, and also the cost of the book, threw away the true value to grab quickly superficial value. Things worth less than $100, less than $50, but you throw away $5,000. Why? Because your value system is based on something else. What do you value? And you need to really sit back and think about that. Last point on this, you should value things that are easy to get. You know, I've trained myself emotionally to say, if I can drink peppermint tea, all is good in the world. And the reason being is because when I was homeless, I remember a few nights I was homeless, and I remember one night it was freezing. I thought I was gonna die. And somebody handed me a styrofoam cup with peppermint tea in it. And it was the first time I had peppermint tea. And I sipped it, I was like, sipped it. And I realized, I said, I got it down, and it was great. It had honey in it. It was great. Looked on the little thing, said peppermint. And I said, you know, when I get to where I'm going, because I always knew that I'd beat KRS-One. It was always a visualization. I said, when I get to my visualization, this cup of peppermint tea will always remind me that no matter what's going on in my life, it is not as bad as that day I was on a park bench. It must have been 2 degrees outside or something below that. And I couldn't get inside somewhere. And somehow, to make a long story short, I got on the train. I hopped the train. I had to get underground. And when I got on the train, somebody gave me peppermint tea. They knew I looked crazy, so they just gave me the peppermint tea. And I sipped it. And I said, this is really good. And I remember from then on, I always drank peppermint tea. I turned my kids on to it, everything with peppermint tea. But you wake up, you sip that, and your psychology says everything's good. Find simple pleasures, simple joys. Some people make their pleasure in life too hard to get. You know, what would make you happy? A Ferrari? Come on, dude. What would make you happy? A walk in the park. What would make you happy? The smell of vanilla. The smell of rose. The smell of sage. All I need is to burn this, and all is good. This is my symbol of rightness and goodness. This brings me back to my position of strength and centeredness. Find something simple like that to conduct your life with. This is called life management. You know, give yourself good memories, because it's you that's going to have to live them. That's KRS-One, reading of the Gospel of Hip Hop. I thank you, and I'll see you guys next week.
The best. Oh, that was awesome, man. That's a damn good camera.
How are you tonight? Good to see you again.
Good to see you
Always,
again.
always. You know it. Because I got a great teacher.
Come on, don't.
There is one rule in hip hop. One rule in fucking hip hop that's been circling for the last 25 to 30 years to 35 years. You do not go on after KRS-One.
Come on, man. And you're done shoved me to the last position.
Yo, look. You do. That is a rule that's been circling for 35 years. No artist, I don't give a fuck who it is, even the new artists of today. You do not go after this man. That's why I'm glad Red and Mev is going right before KRS-One.
They set me up.
No,
They
not
set
at
me
all.
up.
Not at all. Trust me, he's being humble right now. He's serving a humble party, y'all. But when he get out on that stage, it's a different ball game. Everyone you seen tonight is just gonna look cool compared to this guy right here. He about the body shit.
Knock him out the box, Chris. Out the box, Chris. Knock him out the box, Chris. Out the box, Chris. Knock him out the box, Chris. Out the box, Chris. Knock him out the box, Chris. Out the box, Chris.
You killed that shit, man. Look, you crushed it. Look. I said, we gotta compliment this thing here just so that we can go over here and you bring them back home, land the plane nice so that they can leave. Just land it nice.